So you want to start recording videos from your house, but you're a little worried that you don't have that sexy backdrop like your favorite creator. Well, you have come to the right place today because with me, I have Junaid Ahmed, who is the expert at helping people go from crappy home studio, no backdrop, dirty laundry in the background, to a beautiful backdrop that they can be proud of and feel confident when they want to go create some video. So, Junaid, welcome to the show.
David, thank you so much for bringing me on. I'm super excited and honored to be here.
Wonderful. Yeah. So this is going to be very prevalent to me because, as you can see, and for longtime brand science viewers, you'll see that I have a new backdrop behind me. This is actually the first podcast I'm recording with this backdrop. And
Nice.
right at the before we started this podcast, Junaid mentioned that he has some notes for me as how I can improve my backdrop. So we're gonna get into all that today. But first, I want to understand your background and how you got into home studio design.
Absolutely, David. So I've been a huge enthusiast around the tech space for a very long time. And in fact, my very first camera I acquired or I was gifted in 1989. It was a film camera. And I was just a young kid, right? And I was like, wow, this is so cool. So I've been taking photos for a very long time, but it wasn't until 2013 that my wife was like, okay, you obviously love cameras, you're taking photos and videos all the time. Um, Here's your gift. And it was basically a DSLR camera in 2013. I was like, wow, this is epic. I've been dreaming about this for a long time. And around that same time, I had seen that TV studios and film studios were using DSLR cameras as camera rigs because they have such a large sensor and the technology was there where it could capture uh, nonstop video. Well, that changed everything for me. I was like, okay, I want to go deep into understanding how these cameras work. I took about 15 different courses on lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning, and you can still find those same courses. It was all around the foundation of photography, the foundation of video making and filmmaking, and how to interview on camera using DSLR cameras. So I went deep diving, understanding all of the different aspects of cameras, and I even joined meetup groups to go take photos and videos in person. And so I've been really into that tech space, understanding the trifecta of photography, ISO, uh, the focal length, and then the f stop. What those numbers mean and how it changes photography and how it
Mhm.
creates the image that's inside the camera. And it's basically mimicking how our eyes work, right? So the lens and the camera put together. So how did I get into helping others with their studios? Well, it all started with me solving my own problem of having a studio for myself. Now, in 2018, I had started my podcasting, and towards the end of it, a friend of mine asked me to uh, come to this LinkedIn Live event, a LinkedIn local event, basically people on LinkedIn meeting together to make connections. And I took my smartphone and a gimbal there and I was recording video. Well, the host of the event was like, "Wow, that's really cool. You know a lot about this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been playing with this for a few years." He's like, "Would you be open to come and talk at the next local event on how to use iPhone as a video production tool?" I was like, absolutely. So I gave that talk. And then what was funny is I was like, wait, I put all these slides and I put all this information together. What if I could make a course out of it? Because courses were, getting started.
Mhm.
And when I went to create the course content for it myself in my home studio, I did, first of all, I didn't have a home studio. I just had the camera gear and I was watching people were using these vinyl backdrops. I was like, okay, I'll get a vinyl backdrop, put on these yellow walls, and I started recording. But what sucked is that I didn't know how to start talking to the camera. I've been all these years I've been really good behind the camera. But when it came time to be in front of the camera, I was like, oh my god, um, how am I supposed to say this? Even though I had some scripts, some pointers, I was still struggling. I was like, well, I got to go work on me. I got to go work on how to actually tell a story, how to actually hook the person to say, hey, this is what I'm going to be talking about. Stick around, blah, blah, blah. So I continued to focus on my podcasting. I was still podcasting. I had interviewed about 100 guests on the podcast in 2019, and I got better at speaking with them. Now, when 2020 hit, we were all stuck at home. And luckily, I found a job that was 100% remote. So I was like, okay, now I can spend time building that studio out. And as I'm sitting in front of my webcam, all I saw were these big, bright windows shining into the camera. Like, well, that's not gonna work. So I switched the room around, got some work done, started playing around with the space, and at that time I was also watching and learning from Pat Flynn on the power of podcasting. And I saw
Shout out
his
Pat
videos,
Flynn if
right?
you're into podcasting and all that. Yeah, definitely check out Pat Flynn.
You gotta know Pat Flynn. And in his videos, all what I saw was these wood slats behind him. I was like, ooh, I need to have some wood slats behind me. So in this shot, you'll see I've basically put up a complete wood wall, which is actually vinyl flooring that I picked up from Home Depot, and I just put everything. And so that was the beginning of the journey. And as I'm going through this, I'm watching Pat Flynn. He shared his list of gear that's in his studio. And as I'm reading this blog, I was like, wait, I have 90% of the gear that he's talking about. I have all of this. So I start putting my space together. And during this time, we all found communities. We all found ways to connect with other people because we weren't going in person. And I was really fortunate to join this group called Unconventional Leaders on Facebook. And they realized, they're all entrepreneurs. They realized that we need to have some kind of ongoing conversation. So we were meeting on a daily basis at 4 o'clock for about an hour and a half, and we would talk to each other. So that also helped me to tell my story in a safe place. So all these things are happening, and as I'm building and going parallel, building the studio, having the conversation, building my own speaking ability, people started asking me, "How is your image so sharp and clean?" While we're all using the same stuff. I'm like, no, we're not. No, we're
Mm-hmm.
not. So that's how I got into helping people and podcasters and entrepreneurs set up their studios.
What I love about that too is you mentioned when you were behind the camera for the longest time, and then you got in front of the camera, and you go to press record, and it is a whole new experience.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something to discuss as well. But what you mentioned there was you just force yourself to continue to get the reps in, and that's something I've heard so often is
Mm-hmm.
everyone starts
And
unnatural in front of the camera,
yeah.
but then you just get the reps in, and you see your favorite creator
Mm-hmm.
5 years into their journey, and they look so great on camera. Well, go back
Yeah.
to their first video, and it is not the
Yeah.
same.
100%. And
Um,
and and I mentioned that to folks too. Like if you look at MKBHD, he's so natural on camera, but he still has that video that he posted like many many years ago on his YouTube channel, and you can go watch that one, and you can see the drastic difference between that first video and the now video.
100%. So let's start with the idea. I know a lot of coaches, consultants, solopreneurs who are starting their personal brand. They want to get on video, but the fear is I don't have that really sexy backdrop like you have or their favorite
Mm-hmm.
creator has. And they feel that that's the only way to be successful on video is you
Mm-hmm.
have to have that backdrop. So let's start with the idea of what is the importance of having that studio setup, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
the equipment that no one sees because it's either recording or it's the microphone or the camera. No one sees that. But
Yeah.
then there's the visual side of things like the backdrop. So what is the importance of having a home studio?
Well, the home studio is basically your impression or your first glimpse of who you are, right? And as you speak on camera, you want to inform the guest, hey, I'm just starting this out. Level with me, right? But I do want to get the message out. In fact, a story that I absolutely love is Larry King. We all know Larry King. He used to do the show. The first time that he went on radio, uh, the current host had, he moved out, and this was in Miami, so they were constantly coming in and going. So he was a disc jockey playing music on radio, and the producer said, "Hey, you're on tomorrow. What name are you going to use?" So it's like Larry, blah blah blah. We don't know his. I can't remember his last name, but he said, "No, that's not going to fly. You need to pick a different name." And he saw on the newspaper something King's Market or something, so he picked King as his last name, and later on changed his last name. So it's like, okay, you've got to go on, and you're basically the new host for the show. He's like, all right, I'll do it. So he jumps on the radio. He cues up the music and cues down the music to start speaking, and he can't speak a word. So he cues up the music again. And then about 3-4 minutes later, the producer walks in. He's like, "What are you doing? This is a communication. We're in the communication industry. You need to communicate."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay, fine, fine, fine." He's like, and then he says, "This is my very first time running a radio show. My name is Larry King, and this is the very first time I've said that name to anybody." So he himself put on display, hey, this is who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody else. So when we say get started, that means get started where you are, because there are a ton of people waiting to get started, but they think that no, I have to be at level number 10 before I start. But well, how did they get to level 10, right? So what I teach in my book, in my different books that I published, start with what you have, and what we have is a really powerful camera in our pockets already. The smartphones that we carry around, they can, like the Samsung devices, can capture, I think, 8K footage. iPhones can capture 4K footage. These are really powerful cameras. In fact, Apple themselves have been using the iPhone 15 Pro on all of their own productions that you watch online. So I
Mm-hmm.
think October's Scary Fast event, when they introduced the M3 processor, they used all of the cinema gear, but the camera in it was the iPhone. The
Right.
WWDC event that they introduced the new operating system, they used the iPhone 15 Pro. I'm like, holy smokes, that's insane, because it's the level of uh, confidence that you bring and the authenticity that you bring with the camera that you have. So create that content with the camera that you have, because it's going to resonate with the right people, and they're going to be along for the ride. You're empowering them as well.
Yeah. And that, I guess that clarity, well, we'll get back to the idea of like when you want to get started, what's the equipment that you might already have in your pocket, for example,
Right.
that you can get
Mm-hmm.
started with, right? But that 4K image, you know, I I'll look, I'll scroll through LinkedIn and I'll see some videos that's a bit blurry. It
Mm-hmm.
looks like maybe they filmed it on a webcam that wasn't maybe a 4K webcam.
Sure.
And just when I see that, I'm not there's something about that blurriness that gives me
Mm-hmm.
the impression of they're not investing back into their brand, that they're
Right.
they're not taking the time to think about the audience
Mm-hmm.
and say, what do they expect from my content, whether it
Yeah.
be good audio or good video. So is it that there's, is the purpose of investing into quality equipment, quality home studio, that it's just that initial sniff test when someone's scrolling and seeing, your content, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn,
Yeah.
that there's just an automatic, okay, credibility check that, all right, you passed the initial sniff test, I'll check out your content. Like what do
Mhm.
you think is like the core value into actually making that investment into the home studio or the equipment?
I think the core values, again, like you said, it's going to attract the new people to your group or to your video, to your message. But the old video, the crappy video or the crappy camera video, the webcam video, I'm not going to say crappy, the webcam video is going to continue to nurture the people that already know you. And that's what we're trying to get at top of mind. So yes, you do want to invest in a good studio, and guess what? It's been over, pandemic's been over for over a year. There's no more excuses, right? It was okay during the pandemic to have the blurred background, the virtual background, all of that stuff. But we're way past that. And if you're a professional that's trying to sell your services and your business, then it is an investment. It is a marketing expense that you do one time to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, 100%. So we know the value of why we should have this home studio. It's kind of that credibility check,
Yeah.
the initial check of, is this person serious with their personal brand? Or is this person serious in creating content? Now, those who are going from, I mean, we all have different home situations.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're in a small apartment, maybe it's
Yeah.
a studio and space is not readily available. Sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
have a two-bedroom and we have that extra office room that we can transform.
Yeah.
And so we all kind of get into our heads of, you know, where am I going to do this? Where's the spacing? How do I go from having absolutely nothing to
Mm-hmm.
having a studio I can feel proud of? What's maybe the first step someone should be thinking about where they want to make the decision to, okay, let's start a home studio?
Yeah.
How can they kind of find that space within their home to actually do that? Where's like the best space that they could probably carve out?
I think the best space could be de- also depends on the type of content that you're looking to create, right? The best space for, let's say, a YouTube channel talking about cooking food might be the kitchen, right? But if you're in a business that is selling a specific product that can relate to a part of your room, well, use that space as your starting point. So the first thing that I have everybody do is analyze the space that you have. Like figure out, okay, where can I really use and create content? In my videos, sometimes I'll be in my family room and I've got this huge picture frame window that has really nice natural light coming on. So I would put my camera right there and I would talk to the camera, right? So that creates you're getting the good natural light and you got a good camera, and then the audio is going to be pretty good because usually in our family rooms and living rooms we have a lot of stuff in the places, curtains and whatnot, that helps to absorb the echo that might be created if you didn't have those things. So
Mm,
analyze the space that you're going to be in. Figure out where the doors and windows are, and if there's going to be any distraction behind you if you were to create the content. So you want the two types of video where one is the informal and the other one is the formal video. I think my friend Ken Okazaki of GoBox Studio mentioned the two, the Will Smith effect. Now, we've been watching Will Smith on film forever. That's the professional look. But during the pandemic, we saw him record video with his smartphone in his pajamas or in his um, sweats and whatnot. So you want to give the people both ends of who you are, right? When we show up in our studio, we care about the people that we're sending this message to. we're not creating the studio for ourselves. Sure, it gives us confidence, but also we're creating it for the person on the other side because we're respecting them because they're taking the time to watch our video content. So I think it's a double thing that you want to be able to do. So first thing, analyze the space that you're in, figure out the windows and the doors, and then use that window as your main light source.
It's interesting you mentioned that having kind of the duality, if you will, of having a kind of more formal business setup, but then having a secondary location, which is more a little
Mm,
bit more informal.
yeah.
That's something I don't do actually. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Where I think largely the reason, and we can speak to this, but
Hmm.
largely the reason I don't do that is because I have my setup, my good
Yeah.
camera, everything in one spot. And then I fear like if I was to go, over on the couch and set up
Hmm.
there, then I have to like move everything over.
Sure.
So maybe we can get into mobility of setups in a bit. But
Absolutely.
I do like the idea that you mentioned where it's not all your content essentially. It should look the same, I guess, is what you're
Yeah.
saying. And to
And
you
when
meant
I said
go ahead.
when I said the other type of content, the mobility factor, my studio equipment stays here. When I'm in a different location, I'm just using my phone camera. Those vertical videos, those stories, right? So we're creating that um, interaction with our communities because there are different types of posts that we can create on let's say Facebook alone, right? There's the post, there's the text post, there's the photo post, there's the live video, and then there's the stories and the reels. So in the reels, we can have the production quality that we have here, or you can have the uh, impromptu, hey, this is what's happening, and this is what I did, blah, blah, blah. So, you're cutting through and you're creating that reel. And in the stories, you can do it with your phone saying, hey, this is what I'm working on. And a lot of people watch the stories because guess what? There's a very limited number of people that are in our position creating professional content. But there's a lot more people that are consuming the content. That's why 4 billion hours of video is watched on YouTube every single day.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good point. So, all right, we found our space and we want to start kind of glamming up that space. Should we be looking to what's kind of the next thing we should be thinking about once we've actually found our space and where we want to set up our studio?
Absolutely. So once you found the studio, you basically want to get a tripod or some way to set that camera in that position. Now that you've got that camera in the position, now you're free to move around and set the things that are going to be in stage or in shot. And this is something that in Hollywood call you're blocking the shot. You're setting the stage. And what does that mean? The camera only sees 30, maybe 20% of the room, whereas the rest of the room might be a huge mess. For example, my desk here is a huge mess,
Mm.
but it doesn't matter because I'm creating the scene that I want the audience to see.
I
So
think that's
once you've got,
that's a really
yeah,
that's a really important point too, because going back to the idea of having a studio
hmm,
or a smaller apartment, and people get worried. Okay, well, where am I even going to set this up?
yeah,
To your point, especially if you're creating vertical video, you only really see a very small sliver
yeah,
of your background, especially too if you're creating vertical video, because you 90% of the frame is your head and your chest, and then it's
correct.
just kind of right around your head is what they see. So yeah, I like the idea of not needing to worry about having some completely separate room as a studio. Sometimes you just
Hmm.
need a really nice angle or corner of your house.
Yeah, corner of your house, or even uh, go as far away because the other thing the cameras can do is like you can barely see what's in my backdrop, right? In the bookshelf.
Yeah,
I've got I think Darth Vader here and Kylo Ren on the other side,
nice.
and I've got other stormtroopers over here, but they're kind of blurred out, and then that's the functionality of the lens that we're using, right? It's outside of the focus point, So when we're using our cameras, we have our smartphones, we have cinematic mode, which will automatically like blur out farther away elements. So you can use that kind of mode also. But even if you don't, it's so far away, people are not going to show or pay much attention. But what I like to do is I like to involve my background into the conversation as well. So now I'm not hiding anything. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not, right? I'm sharing with them like, hey, I'm in my living room, hanging out with my kids. I've got this thing going on, but I want to talk to you about this specific subject or topic. So now you're involving them because that's what we want. That's what we want when we're watching a movie. Like, oh my God, what's happened? What just happened? I want to know everything. So that's the kind of intrigue and connection you're creating when you create that video.
Hey, Dave here, obviously, but I want to just pause this episode real quick and say thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Brand Science. I hope that you're getting as much value as a viewer or a listener as I've gotten as a host. And if you are getting value from this episode, it must mean that you enjoy nerding out on all things personal branding, content creation, and strategy, which means you're my type of person, so I want to connect. Once you're done this episode, go down to the show notes where you'll find my LinkedIn profile. Click on that link, head over to my profile, and send me a request. When you send the request, there'll be that little pop-up that comes up that you can add a note in the request. Just tell me that you found me from a Brand Science episode so I know that you are one of those loyal, awesome listeners of mine. And let's connect and learn together. Anyway, just want to say, love you. Thanks for listening. Let's connect on LinkedIn. And yeah, back to the episode. So with that, we've mentioned the camera a couple times here, and I know you've mentioned the iPhone as an option. Again, we're looking to go from 0 to 1 here. So
Mm-hmm.
when people are worried about camera quality and all that, a lot of times, as you're saying, just starting with the iPhone is good
Yeah.
enough, especially in 2024, where Apple's making commercials and movies with their cameras nowadays. So
Yeah. Yeah.
for those who want to invest, who may already have an iPhone in their pocket, but if not, it sounds like just even investing into maybe in the 14 Pro, 15 Pro, or whatnot
Mm-hmm.
is good enough for high definition content.
Correct. So that's a great start, right? Because what we're trying to do, and going back to the first thing that you mentioned, we're trying to get the reps in. And whichever camera you have, get the reps in using that camera, and then you can level up in having a dedicated camera in place. Now, I have a few people in my community that use my friend. She runs the Scrap Happy podcast. She uses two iPhones in her setup. One iPhone is right up there for her video, and the other iPhone is mounted something like this, which sees her desktop area. So as she's laying a layout out on for scrapbooking, people can see that, and she can write notes and whatnot. So again, use what you have, and you can level up. Now, we've talked about the camera. I've mentioned the smartphone a few times. What's really important is lighting. So if you have the proper lighting, you can use any camera work really well. And what do I mean by proper lighting? Well, if I were to turn off, I'm using some really good cameras. If I were to turn off the lights, well, you can't really see a whole lot of things,
Yeah.
right? So you want to make sure that the lighting is there. That's going to, again, highlight the subject, highlight the talent in the shot. So once we've analyzed a room, we already have the camera. We're not spending any money, additional money yet, but you want to use the lighting that you have available through the windows, and you can make them softer by just simply putting a bedsheet on front of it. Now, tell me if I'm going off topic, but those are the different steps that I like to talk about. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, I think those are really important because when I'm viewing content on, let's say, LinkedIn, the content that I want to stop and listen to is one that is recorded in high quality and
Mm-hmm.
the lighting is right. Because when you're scrolling by default,
Mm-hmm.
you can't they turn off the audio on
Yes.
videos. So audio is almost the third concern, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes if it looks like it's low quality video and the person's recording it in a dark
Yeah.
basement, it's not very enticing to want to click into anyway.
Right.
So, quality of video, lighting, and then obviously scene of where they're recording. Does it look like
Yeah.
they've invested into where they're recording? And
Yep.
then you click into it, and then there's the audio aspect to it. So maybe we've got the idea to recap. Your phone going 0 to 1, your phone can shoot in 4K.
Mm-hmm.
99% of phones in 2024 can. And if yours doesn't, it's probably a good time to invest into one that can, just being that
Mm-hmm.
it's a phone, but it's a camera, but it's also your phone, right? So there's other uses for it. But then lighting, being near a window with natural light, getting front lit, it sounds like is what you
Yeah.
want. And so let's maybe talk on that third piece then, which is just kind of the backdrop to you. Let's say we have a dedicated area where we're always going to be recording and we
Mm-hmm.
want to have a background that is looks professional,
Right.
but also, what are some of the other things we should be thinking about when we want to set up our background? And maybe we can even, use my backdrop as an example of some things that you would tweak as well.
Sure. So one great point: camera, lighting. Now, audio is number third importance. Right, when they turn the audio on, you want to be able to be legible and people can pay attention to what you're saying. Right, so that's important. And having good audio also helps the software transcribe your text properly, because even though the audio is turned off, we could still read the text that's on those videos. So, design or background design, what I like to do is bring in the elements that inspire you, right? So, I noticed on your left side, you've got the Deadpool and the Wolverine, products, or I don't know,
Yeah, it's from the
jars
from
or
the
what.
the movie that just came out. It's a popcorn bucket and a
There you go.
and a soda cup. Yeah,
Yeah, so you've got those because those are something that you resonate with, right? So bring in
yeah,
the things that you resonate with in your shot, in your space. Again, when we set that camera up where it is, now you can move. Now you're free to move around into your room. Say, okay, what would look better over here, and then you're basically framing your shot according to what you like in there. Now, of course, a bookshelf or a shelf with lights, like you have, all these things are going to help showcase those things. You could, even probably hang things from the ceiling using fishing line wire. I'm just kidding. I mean, that could be pretty fun though. Um, but again, bring things into the space that resonate with you. That when people see that, they're like, "Oh my god, I like that stuff too." Like for example, I've got this Iron Man figurine that I just finished building.
whoa,
Took me
how
two
tall is that?
years. That guy's 20 inches tall.
Wow, okay,
It's almost about a yay tall. So if
yeah,
it's in it sounds good. So that took me like 2 years. So when I put that in my shot, people are like, wait, I know that gold and red color. What is that? And then they can
yeah,
automatically say, oh, that's the Iron Man costume. So now you're engaging you people with the brand design, with the set design essentially. And because we love watching television, we've been watching television since we were young kids, right? So we like to see good things. So bring those elements into your design, into your space, so that people resonate with you.
yeah. One of the things, like my setup in my apartment, I don't have a natural area to
Mm-hmm.
have an office. So I kind of had to
Sure.
jerry rig my own. in an area that isn't supposed to be an office.
Sure.
But I kind of threw a table next to it. Like my kitchen is like right next to me, right? And
Sure.
but
Yeah.
there's a big blank wall next to it.
Mm-hmm.
This is supposed to be an area where there's maybe like um, you know, a table to have food and
Mm-hmm.
eat and whatever. But
Sure.
I turned it into an office, and so I have
Sure.
this. It's the only place that I had like a wider 6 foot-ish wall
Sure.
where I could use as a backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
What's once we kind of find that area where okay, I have somewhere where I have a blank canvas behind me.
Yeah.
What are some of the options that we can take to decorate that area, if you will, to make it look better than just a blank wall? One thing, you mentioned like a bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken the approach of, some curtains basically from
Yeah.
IKEA.
Yeah.
How do we literally have a blank canvas, a blank wall behind us. What should we be thinking about in terms of, okay, how do we start making this look professional and something like the creators we see online?
Yeah. So what I've seen is people are using posters. They're using, bookshelves is another one. Now that bookshelf is about 8 feet away from me, so it kind of makes sense. Even though the rest of there's a lot more room on this side in my office, but what I had started with, like I mentioned earlier, was I started with this blank wooden wall. Now it's a blank wall. It was a yellow wall. It's still yellow behind this, but I started adding this additional level of uh, customization to the wall. But initially, it was so flat. It was nothing on it. So I eventually started putting things on it. So I've got a little metal logo of Hacks and Hobbies podcast up there. I've got a poster from it's a signed copy of Iron Man from Stanley that a friend of mine gifted me. I've got
Oh,
some
wow.
posters here. I've got a whole bunch of things in the studio that basically resonate with me. So that's what I would start with. Take that
Yeah.
blank wall, see what kind of customizations can you do on there, and start putting those in. And it's gonna change over time. And we've seen this in Pat Flynn's back wall. He used to have all the three helmets from Star Wars. He had an Iron Man helmet. He had the
Is it
Stormtrooper helmet. He
Mandalorian?
had the Mandalorian. But now it's changed. Like he's changing it up because as we change, as we grow, things are going to change in our space. So look at
Sure.
those things. What resonate with you, and do a ton of research. Meaning, look at as many things as possible as you can. Because when we're designing an interior, think like an interior designer, right? There's a ton of channels talk about interior designing. How can you bring those elements into your space, and what does it take? Hope that helps.
So, if for anyone who's watching this podcast, you can see mine is was pretty bare in the sense of
Mm-hmm.
like it's the plant. It's I got like the light bookshelf over here
Yeah,
with some things on it, but
yeah,
I almost like purposefully wanted to keep it simple to
yeah.
not maybe distract too much from like I wanted me to be the focus, right? But with a little bit of
Exactly. Yeah,
flair. And I think with yours, you have obviously the bookshelf that has a lot of things on it, but it's far in the backdrop, and you have what do they call it, the bokeh, where it's
the bokeh
the
effect. Yep.
effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's the blurry, so it's not distracting us from you. Like you are
Right.
still the center of attention. Is there
Yeah.
something we should be thinking about when it comes to, you mentioned having posters and things behind you and such?
Yeah.
Should we also be thinking about, okay, but how much is too much in terms of like minimalism versus having things there
Absolutely.
that represent us?
Absolutely. So something that I've seen other creators do, especially when they're on the move or when they're traveling or when they're creating content for education purposes, they also have a blank wall, but instead of just a blank wall, they'll shine like a light, a colored light on that background. Now, this light could be part of your brand, could be part of the message that you're saying, and it's not distracting in that it's not changing colors all the time. It's just solid at one color. So that way, it's creating that separation between you and that wall. I like
Mhm.
the curtains, and think I had curtains a long time when I was turning around, but because the camera that I was using was from 2002, it was everything was kind of not as beautiful.
Yeah.
So again, all of that stuff works. Again, it needs to make sense. Now, the light that's in your shot is almost as bright as your face. So I would probably try to dim it a little more or, create a little more separation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so again, it's a it's a process, right? It's a process that like this took me maybe a year to get it right where I wanted. So now my lights are locked into that color. Um, all the things are locked into place, but it takes time for things to come together.
So I think what's important to note for the audience here is that when we talk about things to add to your backdrop, it doesn't necessarily need to be things that you need to go out and buy. It
Right.
could be things that you
Absolutely.
already have around your house. So, for example, this light that I have next to me, this is something I already had. It was just in a separate corner. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, let me throw that in the shot. To your point, I
Yeah.
do need to dim that light a little bit. But then, the extra props that I add on top of it, I don't know if you can see, but there's books down on the second shelf. That's
Mm-hmm.
books I already owned.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the I bought the Wolverine and Deadpool stuff, but
Yeah.
it's things that like were already in my house and I didn't have to go out and buy.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like 0 to 1, the cost of setting up your backdrop doesn't need to be very exorbitant. It can just literally
No.
be whatever lying around your house, right?
100%. Bring things from other rooms, other places that you have. Like, hey, this would look good because you own those things for a reason. Because it has some kind of affinity for you. So yeah, absolutely. Bring things that you have in your room. We used to have uh, a sequins cushion that had, was blue and gold on one side and red and gold on the other side, or blue and silver on one side, and then when you flip it over, it was the Iron Man face, and when you flip it the other way, it was blue and with Captain America. So for the
Nice.
longest time, I would have that back there in the chair till my kids took it away. I'm like, what, it's fine. It's a look that going to be ever growing, and it shows the growth of your studio and your real life because people get to know you more. On hey, you used to have this. Oh, you added this new thing in there, so now they're more invested in you, and they'll watch literally any content that you create.
It's really interesting too. It's a point that you continue to come back to with your backdrop really representing who you are and your interests. And before this backdrop, I had just a bookshelf right behind me,
Mm-hmm.
and on
Mm-hmm.
that bookshelf, I had a lot more um, elements like that. Books that meant a lot to me, comic books,
Yeah.
and then I had, I've been running the last couple of years. I've run like half marathons, so I had some half marathon medals and things like that.
Nice.
So these were like
Nice.
things that represent who I am. That's why I wanted them behind me. And when it comes to personal branding, that's like the number one thing that we want to make sure we're
Yeah.
getting across in our
Yeah.
content, whether that be we're verbalizing it in a video or we're
Mm-hmm.
contextualizing it in a text post.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but to visualize it within your backdrop, that's also communication as well. So like
It
having
is.
that backdrop that really represents who you are is another way of making the personal in your personal brand, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And the moment I saw the Deadpool, I was like, okay, this guy loves Deadpool, right? It
Yeah.
automatically creates a connection. It's like memes, It's not a meme, but it's a pop culture item that connects us on a much deeper level. Where like I already know who David is. He loves movies. He went and saw Deadpool, and so we could talk about the entire X-Men series. We could talk about the Marvel universe, right? So it automatically creates that connection. And when people see those elements in your shot, in your video, they already have a icebreaker point to start the conversation with you. That's why a lot of people talk about sports. They have sports helmets and or football and whatnot, and you'll see that when you watch sports, like people that are coming on and being guest speakers and whatnot, or guest appearances, you could see their setup and what they're into by the things that they put in there. Because not everybody has 30 minutes to explain who we are, and so that when they say a picture says 1,000 words, well, you're saying 1,000 words with the setup that you're creating in your shot.
I love that concept. Yeah. So we talked about video, lighting, backdrop. We touched on audio, but I want to come back to that because that is a make or break for content.
Yeah,
Poor audio if you can't hear what the person's saying. So this is, I think, a little bit more, I won't call it complex, but maybe just the person who hasn't made their way fully into content creation yet, or a home
mm,
studio, cannot really understand the concept of how important audio actually is, but two,
yeah,
what a good microphone means. Why can't I just speak to my phone or the camera I bought
yeah,
naturally or whatever? So can you kind of speak to the concept of having an external microphone, a dedicated microphone, and
absolutely.
what are some options for people who are just getting started?
100%. So a microphone, it might, we have microphones on literally all the devices that we use. What type of microphone that is and the frequency that those microphones can capture is what the limiting factor is. Plus, most laptops have a type of condenser mic which basically picks everything. There's a lot of noise. They have a limited uh, range of the audio they're also capturing. So that's why those microphones don't work really well. The dedicated microphone, for example, a dynamic or a condenser mic, depending on what type of content you're creating, will also tell you which mic to purchase. And the more accurate you're sounding, you're capturing that sound in the microphone, the more easier people will be able to recognize you in a room full of people. And you probably know this because whenever you're at a place and your friends are going to be there, you basically listen for their voice. Oh, I hear him talking. Just may go see him there. And so that's what a dedicated microphone does for you. Now you don't have to go you don't have to spend a ton of money on it. Lucky for us, with the pandemic and what the industry has been doing, they see the creator economy. So now there are a lot more options, like the Fee Fine, I think has a dynamic microphone that's USB powered. You can pick up for like $50 or $60, right? So those are some of the things that I would recommend. If you can't even spend that one, make sure you at least have some kind of a lavalier mic that's connected closer to you, because it'll have a much larger dynamic range compared to the microphone that's on your laptop or built into your webcam. Now, the cool part about the iPhones and the smartphones, they actually have more than one microphone on device, because they understand that you're going to be creating video content with this. How can we use multiple microphones to isolate the voice of the speaker and eliminate or reduce the sound of external noise? So they do have that kind of technology built in, so that if you were to use your smartphone for video, you'll still sound better. But if you had a dedicated microphone closer to the speaker or the source of the sound, the better sound will be captured. So again, those are some of the things that absolutely make a huge difference. Human beings are auditory communication species. Like without sound, we can't really communicate unless you've learned sign language. Then you're depending on your eyes. I mean, at a very young age, we're speaking to our unborn kid inside the tummy. So sound is very, 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 very important. And they just said that a good audio with a good video with a bad sound is a bad video because you don't understand what's happening. That's why back in the 20s, when Charlie Chaplin was creating video content, he put on a really fun soundtrack and sped up the video so it was more entertaining. So, again, audio is super, super important. You want to make sure that you dedicate a, get a good microphone and then also spend some time in treating the room that you're going to be creating this audio.
And what does that mean to treat the room?
So, thank you for asking. To treat the room, a lot of us have, let's say, really beautiful wood floors or really beautiful walls and, glass panes and whatnot. They are the number one killer of good audio because they'll reflect everything you say. So to dampen that sound, you have some rugs, you have some posters, or you have basically things to disrupt the audio signal from bouncing back and coming back to you. I've been on some calls where the people would put the microphone way out here. Like, oh, I do have a microphone. It's like, well, but it's over here, like about 3 feet from them, or maybe 2.5 feet from them. It's like, well, that's too far. It needs to be right here so that it captures your sound as opposed to capturing the sound reflecting off of all the things. So again, proximity to the microphone, good microphone, treating the room. I think those are some of the things that are really important because when you treat everything right, then your audio is more accurate. And people like to listen to good sound. I mean, we grew up listening to music and listening to speakers and watching TV, and it's good sound that we are attracted to.
And here's one thing I'll say, and I know everyone has a budget and whatnot, and this is 0 to 1, which could be your headphones, your AirPods, and there's speakers on those, but AirPods are not naturally supposed to be microphones. They're headphones,
Right.
and there's noise cancellation. They want you to listen to things on it, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
microphone on it to do calls and such and
Yes.
whatnot. But it's not supposed to be a high quality recording device
Correct.
for Zoom calls and such. One of my pet peeves is when people use their AirPods as their main recording device. Now, again, it is if that's what the budget allows for right now and all that,
Yeah.
that's one thing. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to your point about like quality audio being so critical, I would say if you're going to put your budget somewhere, if you already
Yeah.
have an iPhone, that's your 4K camera. If you want to get the next investment, I would say just a quality microphone outside of your
Yeah.
AirPods, because I've had podcasts, I've had Zoom calls
Mm-hmm.
where they're using their AirPods as the audio device or the
Yeah.
microphone, and it gives this muffled, sounds like they're in a big hallway type of
Right.
thing. And for someone who then wants to take this content and spin it into social content, you're making my editing job very difficult, where I have
Yes.
to go throw
Yes.
that audio file into some other thing to make the audio better. So
Yeah.
help make other people's lives easier by also by help make the viewer's life easier, and
Yeah.
the if you're on a podcast, the
The
host and
host.
editor's life easier.
Absolutely. And as a guest on podcasting, you want to make sure that you invest because you are who you are when you show up on video. So it's super, super important. And I talk about all of those different levels of equipment and gear in my book, Seven Stages of Home Studio Evolution. We're all on a different stage, and you're never going to uh, get where you are till you get started and realize, okay, this is what I need to level up on. This is what I need to work on. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place actually to end it today, because I think we really walked through the core elements you need to go from 0 to 1, so we can feel comfortable and confident with just using a lot of what we already have. But if we're going to
Yeah.
make some of those those investments, yeah, have it be in the audio. And you mentioned
Mhm.
your book, so I want to make sure if people want to learn more about you, your book, your offers, where should they go?
Yeah, so head on over to homestudiomastery.com. I've got the book listed there as well, but you can also find the book over at Amazon. I'm working on the audiobook right now, so we'll have the hard copy, the paperback, the ebook, and the audible versions available pretty soon.
Nice, got everything you need there. Yeah, I'm an audiobook guy, so I'll get that for the when I go on my runs or my walks in the morning. So love
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. Well, Junaid, this has been awesome. I think everyone now has a clear understanding of they can finally, start showing up on video and not worrying about too much about, the investment that's going to take into to getting started. So I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David, for the opportunity.
Great. Thanks, man.
Thank you.